Welcome, everyone. This is the Book Talk Nation event with Cora Carmack, Sophie Jordan, and Kristen Ramsdell. This will work a little bit like an author event in a bookstore. Cora and Sophie will talk about their new books, All Lined Up and Tease. If you haven't purchased those books, you can do so at booktalknation.com or right here on this video page. And Cora and Sophie will sign and personalize it for you. The bookstore's Word for All Lined Up and Katie Budget Books for Tease will fulfill all of the orders and ship them to your door. The sales for these signed and personalized copies will close tomorrow night, so you want to make sure you get your order in by then. You'll notice that there is a chat box underneath the video window. You can use that chat box to interact with Cora and Sophie during the video chat and enter your questions. In about 20 minutes or so, Cora and Sophie will answer the questions from the chat and also answer some of the questions that you submitted ahead of time when you RSVP'd for the event. Until then, I'm going to hand it over to our interviewer tonight, Kristen Ramsdell. Kristen Ramsdell is the romance columnist for Library Journal, the author of the first and second editions of Romance Fiction, A Guide to the Genre, and its predecessor, Happily Ever After. So welcome, Cora, Sophie, and Kristen. And Kristen, I'm going to turn it over to you to start the event.
Thanks a lot.
No problem.
Cora Carmack is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of Losing It, Faking It, and Finding It, plus a novella, Keeping It. I love that last title. Her newest new adult title, All Lined Up, was released last month and is the first in her new Rusk University series. Sophie Jordan is the New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of the YA Firelight Paranormal series and a lot of Avon historical romances. She also writes paranormals as Sherry Kohler. Foreplay, the first book in her new adult series, Ivy Chronicles, was published last year, and Tease, the second in the series, was also released last month. Welcome, ladies. I'm so glad to be talking to you. First of all, there may be a lot of people on the chat already who know, but there might be a few who don't. And so I have to ask this. Would you please tell us all what is a new adult novel? How does it differ from everything else that's out there that people might confuse it with, like young adult or even some chick lit or contemporary? And what sets the new adult novel apart? Who wants to take a crack at that?
I'll tackle that. Hi guys, I'm Cora, and to me, new adult, it's a category of fiction that bridges the gap between young adult fiction and adult fiction, and it's about that sort of unique period in your life when you're right out of high school. You might be in college, or you might be working your first job, you might be moving away from home for the first time, but the point is, it's about those years where you are officially an adult, but you have no idea what being an adult means. And you probably don't want to be an adult if you're anything like I was in my 20s. I was not ready at all. And so it's about sort of all those new adventures and new challenges that you're doing for the first time without the safety net that you had of your childhood, of a family who was there to protect you. There are real consequences for your actions, and if you make a mistake, it can affect the rest of your future. And so that's what new adult is to me. And there have been books in both YA and adult who have featured people of the same age range, that 18 to sort of 25 area, but I think new adult is very specifically about the voice and about the challenges that the characters face that are about that life period and not just about the age. So.
Sophie, do you want to add anything?
Well, that's a great explanation. That kind of covers it. I don't know. I talk about, I write in YA and then I write in adult, and when I write my YA, of course it has romance in it, but and I kind of end my YA novels with the romance being very hopeful that, they're more than likely going to be together forever. But in the back of my mind as a reader, I'm like, come on, they're 16 or they're 17. Maybe they won't. They probably will. They'll still be friends. So I like to think new adult is maybe the first time in their life where I really believe it, that the reader can believe it, where it's maybe not the first love of their life, but it's the first love that actually matters. So.
Right. No, thank you. Cora, you mentioned voice, and when I was reading, of course, your books, I noticed they are in first person, which to me is very typical of young adult, and also some chick lit and gothics, but you don't write Gothics, and these aren't Gothics. You know, is that important? Do you think you could be as effective writing in third person as you can be in first for this kind of novel?
I think so. I think predominantly, if you look at the category right now and the books that are on sale, they are predominantly first person, and I think that has less to do with you know, that it has to be this way or it can't be that way, and more just the fact that it's really easy to connect with a character in first person. You just get like a straight, you're just like plugged into their point of view. But I do think that third person can work. There are a couple third person new adults out there that I think are good. Most of them are very close third person, so you still feel like you are experiencing it. I have a work in progress new adult that's third person, and I think it's just one of those things, like with every genre, it's a book to book thing. Like sometimes the reason I chose to do third person for my work in progress is because it features a large cast of characters, which is easier to juggle in third person. So
Right.
I think it just depends on the book.
Yes, it does. Sophie, any thoughts?
I love writing in first person. I've done it in YA. I write in third person in adult romance, so I definitely feel like it can go both ways. But there's just there's an immediacy to it. And I also think it just kind of ties into the voice and the tone that you find in new adult, in that, you know, that early 20 group.
Right.
I don't know, it just feels a little more stream of consciousness in the moment. So, and even as angsty as it can get, new adult, and some of the topics are very serious and some of the themes are very serious, it's still a lot of fun, I think. So that's what I get from writing in first person. I don't know, maybe I'll try one in third, but right now I'm happy to stay in first when it comes to new adult.
Oh, thanks. What drew you to this particular age group? And this is for both of you, because as young as you are, you're not 18 anymore, probably, even though you have lived through these times. And I'm always curious as to why people choose to write in a particular, either a particular genre or particularly for this age group. And is it difficult?
For me, it was really natural. I started, Losing It was my first book published, so new adult is all I have published. But before I was writing new adult, I was writing YA, but I always sort of wrote things on the upper edge of YA because that was what I was interested in. And for me, the reason I write new adult is because in my 20s, that's when I really figured out who I was. In high school, I was still very much concerned with pleasing my parents, pleasing my teachers, being all the things that they wanted me to be. And that stuck with me even through my first year and a half of college. And it was sort of right before my sophomore year in college, or right after, I guess, that I really sort of woke up and was like, hey, this is the rest of my life. Shouldn't live it like anyone else wants me to live it. I've got to figure out how I want to live it. And so that's why for me new adult is the simplest thing to write, because it's what I know. I didn't really get a lot of experiences in my YA years as I did a new adult. And then when I actually started writing my first book, Losing It, was actually right after I'd been out of college 2 years, I guess, and I was experiencing sort of that post-college slump where I was like, oh, being an adult is so much harder than I thought it was going to be, and there was all the this pressure and responsibility, and more than that, I missed my friends. I missed sort of the carefree attitude of college. I missed the idealism of feeling like I could tackle the world and actually take it on, which was missing 2 years later after I had already attempted to tackle and fail miserably. So for me, it was very much so escapism, but also a way to work through my own sort of issues that I was having about being a new adult. So.
Ah, thank you. Sophie, what about you? What has drawn you to this too?
Well, I mean, the fact that so much of new adult novels have they're a romance at the core, that is always going to draw me. But I remember when I heard about new adult, I didn't really know what it was. I had a writer friend who was telling me she was working on one, and it just sort of went in one ear and out the other. Right. And then, as it is for a lot of people, I picked up my first new adult. I don't even think I realized I'd grabbed a new adult. I just was drawn to it. I picked it up, I read it, and it was Easy by Tamara Weber, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is new adult. This is a whole new, you know, I'm very familiar with YA and very familiar with romance, which dealt with typically older heroines, but now I was like, this is a whole new world. I could do something new. It was really exciting, and my early 20s, early 20s to 25, for me, it was, that's the time of my life when I met my husband and I fell in love, and, you know, I kissed quite a few frogs before I got to him, so I could really tap into that and still remember that. And there's so much of the absurdity in that time of life, the dating. Oh, you know, if it wasn't my story, it was my roommate's story who came in. There was just an endless fodder there. So it was just sort of a return to that. I talk about the Ivy Chronicles as being full of experiences that if they didn't happen to me necessarily, they happened to someone I knew. So it's a lot of fun and still accessible, even though I'm no longer in my 20s. So
anyway, thank you. You've probably already answered this to a certain extent, and so I won't belabor it because you've already said how easy is it to get into the heads of kids at this particular age. And I think, unless you have something to add, you've said how that it's like going back, and you understand. Or is it? Do you still think that you're relating to kids of this age? I shouldn't call them kids anymore, but
well,
new adults of this age.
I think the thing that enables authors of any age to really tap into this age group is that so much of it is about hope and about fear, because that's the predominant emotions at that time in your life. Is you're so hopeful about, you know, what you're going to be, what you're going to accomplish, who you're going to know, and who you're going to be. But it's also terrifying because there is this fear of failure holding over your head the entire time. And I think anyone of any age can experience that because it never really goes away. I mean, you're always hopeful for something, and you're always afraid of whether or not you can succeed. And so I think that that's what people, not just authors, but readers too of any age, can tap into this perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really just the human condition, you know, whether you're you know, whether it's you're discovering yourself and you're taking, you know, it's part of your life journey and growing up and finding someone or finding the wrong person to find the right person to find yourself. I mean, it's something that can happen at any age almost. And plus, I watch a lot of Teen Wolf. I think that keeps me in. Cora knows my love for Teen Wolf. That like
I started watching Teen Wolf just because you watch Teen Wolf and you watch it all the time, and now I love it. It's true.
I do. I'll have to start watching it now too. Thanks. Both of your series. Now we'll get to your books. I've sort of picked your brains on the other things. Both of your series were set on small liberal arts college campuses. One in Texas and the other someplace in New England. I can't quite figure out where Dartford is. And
no one can. It's a mystery.
That's sort of what I figured. Anyway, but actually, I thought you nailed the settings. I did my undergrad at a small liberal arts college in the middle of the country, actually, not in California, and so I really had a lot of fun. I like going back to college too. So I wanted to know why you chose the campuses like this for your particular stories. Would you have set these someplace else? Why did you zero in on those? I love both.
You have specifics about this.
Wait, did you ask me first? Because I hear my like 6-year-old screaming.
Oh, I'm throwing it to you because I've heard you talk about this before.
Okay, well, I did graduate with a liberal arts degree, but it was at a very large state university, and actually the liberal arts portion of the college was kind of the smallest segment of the college. You know, the business school, you know, was much bigger. I know. But just even in that college, we all, you know, you started seeing the same people, the same professors. You know, it's like you're in a bubble within a bigger, you know, within a bigger ship. So I attended A&M. So I just decided I would set it in a fictitious university in New England, and my editor attended college in New England, and she was like, yeah, throw in some Ivy, some a cappella singers, let it snow in the winter. And I'm like, got it. But the actual experience is the way there was kind of a strip of college, bars, restaurants and bars all together on the university. There were just those places that the kids haunted, those familiar haunts, and especially within my group, within the liberal arts, there was places that we went to, coffee shops that, you weren't going to find someone who was majoring in ag necessarily there. So I just pulled a lot from my memories, and people who read it, I think I met someone who was at my signing yesterday. They went to Texas Tech, which, I didn't go to Texas Tech, but she was like, it felt like my school. And I was like, well, it's sort of like every man's kind of campus.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's the same for me. I went to a rather large school, but it was a private university. I went to Baylor, also in Texas. Sophie and I are both Texas girls. But I was a theater major, and so like Sophie mentioned, I was in this very isolated group within a much larger university, and I liked that because it had sort of all the things that that were nice about high school, like that you were seeing the same people all the time, you had the same people in your classes, but it was still part of a bigger world, and so it's a nice way to, for me, at least in real life, it was a nice way to sort of ease into the larger universe, is because I grew up in a really tiny town. There were 80 people in my graduating class, and I went to I'd been with most of them since kindergarten. So for me, that kind of college experience was a great way to ease into bigger things. And so, like Sophie, I just kind of wrote what I knew. But also for me, I was really concentrating on writing at Texas University, and so I pulled a lot from the school that I went to, but then also just my own experiences growing up in Texas, even my high school experiences, and sort of pulling them into the college realm, because that was my main thing, is I had to not just tackle a college atmosphere, but a Texas college atmosphere. So.
Right. Yeah. No, and the thing is, they were both small colleges, but they were different. You could tell they were true to personally, I thought, they were true to their settings. Anyway, both of your books have a lot of humor in them. It's subtle. It's not certainly slapstick or anything, but they also tackle some really, really serious issues. Other than, this is sort of a serious question, other than just a great read, providing that for your readers, what do you think that you hope that the readers, what else should they take away from your books? It'll be different for each reader, and it's different for you than it may be for the readers. But what are you, as an author, trying to convey with your stories?
What I try to convey in every book I write, I write romance, yes, regardless if it's YA, new adult, historical romance. Romance is what you're going to find in any Sophie Jordan novel you ever pick up, and what I believe romance carries is the message of hope. Mm-hmm. And in new adult novels particularly, you're not dealing with vampires. There's no, well, in mine, there are some in new adult, but it's not a paranormal new adult. It's not even historical. There's not the constraints of time and of a historical setting. These are somewhat, realistic books that I feel like are about women of today that have maybe, not had the perfect upbringing. They didn't necessarily have the perfect family life, parents, yet they're in college and they're figuring it out, and they're figuring out themselves, and they're finding how to have a healthy relationship too on top of it. So I had this interesting conversation just the other day with my mother, and we were talking about a cousin, someone in our family tree that had no father in the scene at all growing up, and her mother had a lot of difficulties and drug abuse and wasn't there, and her daughter led such an exemplary life, had married and was raising her kids, and she was working 2 jobs, and her kids are now starting college, and and I was like, why do you think she didn't follow, the path of her mother, That's the kind of girl, I write about, the ones that even though, she didn't get dealt the best hand in life, she's found, happiness and love, and, and so they're about hope. I don't know. Yeah, that's what I hope people take away.
Thank you. Cora?
Did she disappear?
I think she disappeared. Oh, dear. Anyway, you do give that message of hope in your book. I mean, she does too, if you can still hear me, Cora. But because your character, your heroine, had such a dysfunctional family to deal with, I thought, you know.
She did. I think she is like someone that you might find somewhere rattling around in my distant family tree.
Oh, okay.
Who, you know, definitely was dealt a bad hand, and she's the kind of girl that, you know, or a boy for that matter, just a person who could have lost her way and just, you know, been lost in life. So that's the bittersweet, you know, the background, but then the happiness and the hope, and and that's what I get from readers who email after they've read the book. They just say they feel like, you know, it helped them. It got them through something, you know, some tough times.
Oh, good.
Cora, you're back.
Cora's back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened, but I had to go like unplug and replug in my internet because the world hates me. So.
No, the world loves you. Anyway, did you hear the question that I asked before? What do you hope the readers?
I did.
What do you hope you convey? No.
Say it one more time.
Okay. Your books have a lot of humor, but they also deal with some really serious issues. And other than just providing a really wonderful book, a good read, what do you hope that the readers take away from this? What are you trying to convey as an author, other than?
I mean, my hope is always that I try to find a character with each book that is different and relatable. The reason I started writing my first book, Losing It, I chose to write about this girl who's kind of quirky and weird, and you see girls like her in books all the time, but they're typically like the side character, the like best friend sidekick, and so I was like, I wanted to know what would happen if I pushed her front and center and made her the main character. And I got so many lovely emails from readers who were like, you know, I've never seen, you know, a character like this as the main character in the book, and she's just like me. She's just a little weird and a little awkward. And so that was something that I really grabbed onto with future books. And each of my characters is different. They're not all weird and awkward like her, although that is a tendency of mine. But for each book, I try to find a perspective that I haven't done yet, that someone could read that book and feel connected to the characters. So for All Lined Up, it's about a girl who doesn't get to have the normal college experience full of freedom and like getting to reinvent yourself. She is stuck in the same world that she's been in, and so that was the new perspective I wanted to tackle, and that's what I'll just keep doing, is trying to find those characters that people can relate to.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I'm getting a message that people want to ask questions, so I will stop and I will turn it back over to Dave, and he can take it from there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kristen. So it's time for, like Kristen said, it's time for us to take a few reader and audience questions. You can go ahead and keep typing your questions live. We already got a few. So let's start out. Our first question is for both Cora and Sophie. When starting a new series, do you create a story or series Bible that you go by? And if so, can you explain your plotting process a little bit?
Sophie?
I wish I did, because as y'all heard earlier, before we went on, I was complaining because this week I'm finishing the third book in the Ivy Chronicle series, and I do not know if I mentioned or planted the seed if Georgia has any siblings or not. Georgia, you know, my series is about 3 sweet mates. So book 1 is in foreplay, that's Pepper, and book 2 that's out now is Tease, and that's Emerson's story, and now I'm writing Georgia's story. And I'm pretty sure I planted a mention of her having just a one-liner somewhere that Georgia had a sibling. And I am not 100% sure. But, you know, when you're in your character's head over the course of, you know, 80,000 words, whether or not they have a sibling might come up. So if anybody knows, can you email me, just Facebook, or post me? People who read Foreplay and Tease. Does Georgia have a sister? I think I said she did, but I'm not sure. You know, I've kind of made generic notes at the very beginning when I plot, just like physical characteristics. That's sort of the big thing that usually catches me. Like, you know, there's secondary characters even that come up all throughout the series, and there's a secondary character named Suzanne. I had to go back and write in Tease. I had to go back and Foreplay and look for a description of her. It's always a good idea. I wish I did it, and I don't always, in answer to your question. Cora, what about you?
I don't make a series Bible, but I do. I am a thinker, and I think like 7 bajillion things ahead. I just don't always don't write them down. I did have to sort of, after I finished All Lined Up, I had to write this was not for me. This was for like my agent and my film agent and those kinds of things. I had to sort of write a series arc of where I saw sort of the football team in this going, as well as I wrote sort of a synopsis of the book and those kinds of things. So sometimes I have to do it because other people tell me to do it. But in terms of what I do for myself, I think way ahead, which is why like. So, for example, in All Lined Up, you meet these 2 guys really just briefly in passing, and they're 2 wide receivers on the team, Brooks and Torres, and they only get mentioned like 3 or 4 times in the book, but when I was writing about them, I knew all of these things about them because I'd already sort of thought ahead to what their stories might look like if I continued to sort of flesh out this team and continue to tell stories for each player. And so that's just, I think that's just, some people do it and some people don't. I am constantly thinking about these books and thinking about these characters as if they were real people. I like talk to my editor and my like sister and people like that, and I'm like, and I'm talking about Torres, who is not even a real person, but we have whole conversations about him. So yeah, I don't make a Bible. I probably should. It would probably save time in the long run, but yeah, I don't.
Another question for both of you. We can start with, I guess, Cora this time. How do you choose your character names?
Well, that's hard. Everyone is sort of different. It's one of those, okay, so New Adult, I'm just going to go there. New Adult gets a lot of slack for having, like, strange character names, and we are totally guilty of that. But the thing is, the reason we do that is because it's really hard to find character names that haven't been used before, and in this genre that is dominated by fans who love to talk about their book boyfriends and things like that. If you've got 20 book boyfriends named Ben, it becomes really hard to know like what book you're talking about. And so the advantage of having a different and unused name is that if someone's tweeting about your book, they know immediately. If someone sees that character name, they immediately know, oh, they're talking about this book, which is it comes in handy a lot marketing wise. But for me, it's a mix of, sometimes I look up like the baby name websites and I do that. Sometimes I know a character's name going in and I have no idea why I know their name. I just know that that's their name. Sometimes I steal readers' names from like signings. So, for example, the second book in the Rescue University series, All Broke Down, comes out in the fall, and the girl's name in it is Dylan. And I actually had a girl named Dylan come through my signing line last year at BEA, and I wrote down her name on a sticky note because I was like, I love the idea of a girl named Dylan. And I wrote it down, and I never forgot about it, and now it's going to be in a book. So I think we get names from all over the place.
How about you, Sophie?
This is a funny subject because New Adult definitely has a different vibe in the names. Pepper is my heroine's name in Foreplay, which is now that I think about it, I'm like, yeah, that's totally a New Adult name because there's probably not a lot of Peppers running around. There's a lot of Pomeranians running around named Pepper, but not a lot of girls. So, and it's funny because on the top of reviews, it definitely, sometimes there's whole paragraphs devoted to her name. They're like, Pepper, what the hell kind of name is Pepper? What was her mom on, crack? And I'm like, well, probably. She really was on crack, so it ended up working out. But when it came time to write Tease's book, I wanted to name the hero Isaac because, hello, I'm obsessed with Teen Wolf. And then this goes to the boss right here. This is Avon marketing people. They're the boss. My publicists. Squeeze you. They told me no Isaac. Jesse, are you watching? No, they were like, hey, Isaac sounds a little like an older hero's name, not as current. And I was like, man, Isaac, don't y'all watch Teen Wolf? And funny enough, they didn't watch Teen Wolf. What's up with that? So Isaac, after thinking about it, has become Shaw. So that worked out, actually. That's fine. I grew to really like the name Shaw. But and in the third book, Georgia is the girl, and it just really works with her personality. She's a very conservative girl from the South. It's kind of, very, she grew up with cotillion, and that's her thing. So she would have a name like Georgia. And the hero's name, the hero, it's starting to come out now that the hero of the third book is a guy that was introduced in book 1, and I never intended for him to be the hero, but readers, they wanted it. So Logan it is, which again, it's a popular name, but a little more common. So, but now in the future, I think I'll be definitely, I don't know, I think I'm going to take a page from Jay Cronover, who comes up with these amazing names. They're, and then they're the book titles, like Jet, Rome. I mean,
she never has to worry about titles. I loathe her for that.
Her characters' names are awesome. I think I'm just going to text her from now on or email her when I need a new character's name.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question. And this question comes from our chat. I was wondering if you use your experiences with family and friends for your books, or how much they affect your storylines.
Yes. If you've read All Lined Up, it's a pretty personal book for me. When I was asked to write it by my editor, because I grew up in Texas, my dad was a football coach, and so frequently, when I just tell stories, I end up telling stories about Texas. And so actually HarperCollins approached me about writing sort of this college-age Friday Night Lights, and I was like, sure, I can totally do that, that's fine. And then I actually sat down to write it and didn't realize how many unresolved feelings I still had about my life growing up in Texas. And so I had to sort of drag those all out when I was writing it. But the relationship between Dallas, the main character in that book, who was named for the Cowboys, yes, now that we're talking about names, but she and the relationship with her dad are very closely related to the relationship I had with my dad. Dallas and the coach sort of fight mostly over her desire to do dance, and my dad and I fought a lot over my desire to do theater, which is what I did before I started writing full time, and there is a lot of that in there. But this time I had to sort of, when I was living it, I was always right, and my dad was always wrong, and I had to sort of approach that from a different place as the author. I couldn't just be Dallas; I had to be the dad too. So I definitely hugely draw from my own relationships, my own experiences, and sometimes it's little funny things that we throw in that are little events, like Sophie mentioned earlier, funny dating stories and stuff like that. And then sometimes it's bigger things that form a piece of the soul of a character that are also a piece of my soul. So.
Sophie, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned a little, the anecdotes are there. I was blessed or fortunate enough to have, great parents, great brothers. However, my dad came from 9 kids, and my mom came from 7, and there's a lot of family drama in there. So, and in those skeletons in the closet, yeah, I think if you have family with, even a small dose of, what's the word? Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank when it's dysfunction. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a writer. Yeah, any dysfunction in your family, in your immediate family or your extended family, can be really useful in writing new adult. So, hey, just pull that stuff out, exercise those demons. There you go.
Put all your own issues on the page.
That's right. No one actually recognizes themselves on the page. I mean, don't go so far as to name a character after that person, but they don't see. People have a hard time seeing. We have a hard time seeing our own flaws. We're not going to necessarily see them on the page.
Mine was totally the opposite. When my first book published, Losing It, I had so many friends from college. They're like, this character's me, right? This person's totally me. And I was like, no. And it just happened, unfortunately, that they would, the character name would start with the same letter as there, and it was completely accidental, but they're like, this is me, right? And I'm like, no, not really. It's more like a little bit of you and that person, and then imagination. So I don't know.
Right. It's just a seed in there.
Well, thank you both very much. That brings us about to the end of our event. But before I let everyone go, I want to remind you that the books are for sale. You can purchase a signed and personalized copy of All Lined Up and or teas right here on this page. Those sales will close tomorrow night, so make sure to get your order in by then. And Cora and Sophie will sign and personalize the copy for you. And then Word or Katie Budget Books will ship it right to your door. We'd like to give a big thank you to Word and Katie Budget Books for hosting this event, and thank you to everyone who joined us tonight and submitted questions. Cora, Sophie, and Kristen, it was a pleasure to have you guys here and joining us here on Booktalk Nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.